"They've all voted, Mrs. Talbert. The eviction will proceed." That was the sentence that cracked the air like a thunderclap. I was still holding my Pyrex of peach cobbler, steam curling against the October chill of the HOA meeting hall. The room had that smell: old metal chairs, dry coffee, and someone's floral lotion. And just like that, I was being erased. "You mean I'm losing my home?" I asked, my voice catching on the word home. Darla Langford, HOA president, with her matching scarf and matching teeth, didn't flinch. "According to the plat revision, your house encroaches on communal property. We've allowed this oversight long enough." Oversight. 42 years of marriage, essay. The cedar fence my husband built, the oak we planted when our daughter was born. An oversight. People looked away. Some pretended to shuffle papers. Only Gary Willis, who still owed me a ladder, met my eyes, and even he blinked fast and looked down. I didn't argue. I walked out, cobbler untouched, and drove home with my heart rattling like a dryer full of nails. I didn't cry. Not yet. The house felt colder than usual. I switched on the lamp in the den and stood in front of the old roll-top desk my husband swore he'd organize one of these days. I opened the bottom drawer. There it was, the rusted gray lockbox. I hadn't touched it in 8 years, not since I buried Daniel in a spring storm. The key was still on his keychain, shaped like a tiny compass. Inside, just 2 things: a crinkled deed, brittle as onion skin, and a folded map drawn on vellum, annotated in Daniel's neat engineer's hand. The map didn't match the one the HOA had shown me. And then I saw it, a red X drawn behind our shed, near the edge of the property line. Next to it, the words, "Bury after final inspection. No one else sees." I stood there, clutching the map, heart hammering like I'd found a message from a ghost. What the hell did Daniel bury? The soil behind the shed was softer than the rest, looser, darker, like it hadn't been there long. I pressed the heel of my boot into it, and it gave way easy, like someone had stirred it with a spoon. Daniel's old gardening spade was still hanging in the shed, rusted at the edges but solid in the grip. I knelt down, knees creaking like folding chairs, and started to dig. 12 minutes in, metal hit metal. I wiped the dirt away with my sleeve. It was a tin box, sealed with duct tape and damp at the corners. I pulled it free and sat back on my heels, panting like I'd run a mile. The wind stirred the maple branches overhead, brittle leaves skittering across the lawn. Inside the box were 2 thick envelopes, both yellowed but intact. One was marked in Daniel's handwriting, "Lorraine, only open if they come after the house." The other was labeled, "Sharp and square. To be given to Marlene K. if anything happens to me. Marlene K." The name stopped me cold. I didn't know a Marlene. Not now. But something about it tickled the back of my mind, like a faint itch behind old wallpaper. I opened the letter with my name on it, fingers trembling. The paper inside was lined, torn from the notepad Daniel kept by his recliner. The smell of old ink and wood smoke rose from it, so familiar it made my eyes blur. Lorraine. If you're reading this, then they've done what I feared. Don't trust the HOA board, especially not Darla. She knows what we found in '98. That boundary line isn't an accident. I marked the real line on the map in this box. The one on file is doctored. Keep this hidden until you have to act. And whatever happens, don't destroy Marlene's letter. It's not just about the land. I read it twice. Then the landline rang. No one calls me on that line anymore, not since Carla moved to Seattle. I picked it up. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a low, careful voice. "Lorraine Talbert? This is about Marlene. We need to meet." The cafe was nearly empty, just the way I liked it. A bell above the door chimed as I stepped in, clutching Daniel's envelope in my coat pocket like it might vanish if I let go. Curtis Hall was easy to spot. Broad shoulders, plaid shirt, and that look men get when they've carried too much responsibility for too many years. He stood as I approached, polite like a man raised right. "You must be Lorraine." I nodded, and we shook hands. His grip was steady, but his eyes held questions he hadn't figured out how to ask. "I appreciate you coming," he said. "Marlene was my aunt. She passed in 2017, but before she died, she left me something. Told me not to open it unless your house ever showed up in the county's sale alerts. My house isn't for sale, I said. That's the thing, he replied. The alert popped up this week. Legal filing. HOA petition to seize the parcel. My stomach turned. He pulled a manila folder from his coat and set it between us, faded, sealed with an old pink ribbon. I never opened it. Didn't feel like mine to open. I untied the ribbon, my fingers stiffer than I liked to admit. Inside was a single Polaroid and a typed page. The photo was grainy, but I knew what I was looking at. The back slope of our property, before the second fence went up. There were 3 people standing in the photo, Daniel, Darla Langford, and a tall woman I now recognized as Marlene. They were standing beside a boundary stake, wooden, painted red, and the shadows behind them were long. But there was a 4th figure, half out of frame, only the edge of a body, and a jacket. Not just any jacket. The navy windbreaker I gave to our daughter before she left town for good. I hadn't opened Carla's box in years. It sat under the guest bed, dusty and dented, the edges fraying from too many moves. She left in spring of 2008, slammed the door so hard the trim cracked, said she'd never come back to a house built on lies. I thought she meant Daniel's temper, or maybe mine. We were both stubborn, 2 sides of the same rusty coin. But now, I wasn't so sure. The jacket in the photo was hers, navy blue with a stitched sunflower on the back, her senior art project. She'd painted it freehand during a week of thunderstorms. While Daniel paced the hallways pretending not to worry, I'd kept it, folded tight with her sketchbooks and a concert stub from that folk band she used to follow. I opened the sketchbook. On page 6, there it was. A map, not a drawing, an actual survey sketch traced over with care. The property lines curved like a spine, and in the margin she'd written, "Wrong. Dad said this was wrong." Names were written in the corners, then scratched out. One still visible. Langford. My hands trembled. What did Carla know? I was still staring when the thump came at the door. A white envelope slid through the mail slot, stiff and square. Certified. I tore it open with a kitchen knife. Inside, an official county summons. I was requested to appear before the registrar at 9:00 a.m. Thursday, 2 days from now. The reason? Dispute over historical deed priority. They wanted me to bring all original documents related to the parcel, including maps. At the bottom, a name was signed in blue ink. Registrar, Malcolm Reese. I hadn't heard that name since 1998. Chapter 427 generated, Malcolm Reese. I hadn't thought of him in decades. Back in 1998, he was barely 30, fresh out of law school, full of tidy logic and nervous energy. Daniel used to call him the only honest man in the whole building. We'd had a minor scuffle with the city then, something about a fence permit and an old parcel split. But Daniel had handled it. Afterward, he came home quiet, carrying a rolled-up survey tube and a tired look. If anything ever happens, he told me that night, he'll know where to look. Now I was holding a summons with Malcolm Reese's name printed in ink, neat and formal. I spent the evening at the dining table, lights low, pulling out every paper that mattered. Daniel's deed, the vellum map, Carla's sketch. A 2004 property tax bill marked paid in his tidy handwriting. Then I laid it all over a current zoning map. I used a ruler, same as he used to. The old line, Daniel's line, started at the cottonwood stump and ran at a slant, about 15 degrees off the modern plat. I followed it carefully, and then I saw it. The line ran directly through Darla Langford's backyard patio, her outdoor fireplace, her koi pond, not my land, hers. I stared at it for a long time, the silence ticking loud around me. If this was right, and if the registrar confirmed it, Darla wasn't trying to take my land. She was trying to keep hers. I sealed the papers in a manila envelope, but something made me hesitate. Originals or copies? If this was going to get messy, and it would, I needed to be smart. I'd just finished making duplicates when the phone buzzed. "A restricted number," I answered. "Mrs. Talbert," a male voice said, clipped and low, "you need to be very careful tomorrow. Don't bring the originals." Click. The registrar's office smelled like paper and old coffee. I got there 15 minutes early. The building was nearly empty, just the security guard and a receptionist with chipped red nails flipping through a magazine. Malcolm came out himself to greet me. Time had weathered him, but I recognized the same careful posture, the kind that made people underestimate how observant he was. His handshake was warm but brief. "Mrs. Talbert," he said. "Let's talk somewhere quiet." The back conference room was dimly lit, the windows fogged from the morning dew. He closed the door and pulled out a leather folder already marked with my address. "You brought copies?" he asked, glancing at the envelope in my hands. "Yes," I said. "Someone told me not to bring the originals." He didn't flinch, but I saw the flicker of awareness in his eyes. "I'm not surprised," he muttered. He reviewed Daniel's deed first, then the map. His brow tightened, mouth pressing into a line. I could almost hear the calculations clicking in his mind. This isn't the version we have on file," he finally said. "And that's the problem." "Meaning what?" I asked. "Meaning someone revised the plat in 1999, quietly, without process. I remember objecting, but Darla's husband, he was a zoning commissioner then, pressured the office. This was political." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Your home was never the problem, Mrs. Talbert. Hers was. This map proves it." I stared at him, my pulse thudding. "So now what?" Malcolm sighed. "Now we have a mess. If this becomes public, she'll counterclaim. You'd better be ready for a long legal fight. Also," he opened a second folder. "Someone accessed your land file 2 days ago. Logged in under temporary clearance, no name attached, but they downloaded every image, every title entry." Before I could ask who, a sharp knock. The door opened without invitation. A tall woman stepped in, slate-gray suit, hair pulled so tight it looked lacquered. "Registrar Reese," she said crisply. "We need to suspend this meeting immediately." She turned to me. "There's been a new claim filed against Mrs. Talbert." She called it a nuisance complaint. Clarissa Vaughn, slate-gray suit, voice like a cold blade through butter. She stood in the registrar's office like she owned the building. Malcolm's jaw twitched, but he nodded once. "Until this is officially logged, we'll suspend review," he said, almost apologetically. "Standard protocol." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I collected my papers and left with my chin high. Clarissa followed me into the hallway. Her heels clicked like a metronome of menace. "Mrs. Talbert," she said in a voice sweet as cough syrup, "you may not realize how serious this is. There's photographic evidence of you digging on land in dispute. If this escalates, we'll be forced to request a court order. You should consider a graceful exit." "Graceful?" I repeated. "Like what? Selling my house for $1 and walking away?" She didn't answer, just smiled. That night, the rage in my chest was volcanic. I turned over every drawer, every folder, every box. Finally, in the hall closet, I found Daniel's old windbreaker, the one he always wore to night inspections. As I shook it out, something clinked in the lining, a USB stick. My hands trembled as I plugged it into my laptop. Just one file. Daniel Voice Final.wave. I clicked play. His voice, familiar and raw, filled the room. "Lorraine, if you're hearing this, then something's gone wrong. The person you can't trust is..." And then, static. The file cut off. Corrupted. No backup. Just that sentence dangling like a noose. The person I can't trust? Is who? I played the clip 10 times. Each time, it ended the same way. The person you can't trust is... And then static. I tried everything. Repaired the file. Converted formats. Nothing worked. The sentence stayed broken, like a cord cut mid-pull. I stared at Daniel's coat, still draped across the kitchen chair. His smell lingered faintly. Cedar? Engine oil? A hint of the peppermints he always kept in his pocket. Then I remembered, a night long ago, rain against the windows, the old dog whining at the door. Daniel had come home soaked, his boots caked in red mud. I asked where he'd been. He didn't answer, just kissed my forehead and went straight to the garage. He stayed out there for hours, writing letters. One of them, I remembered, had a name on the envelope. Just an initial. K. Now I wondered, was it Kenneth Ulrich? The name popped like a cork from a bottle. Kenneth had been Malcolm Reese's boss back in '98. A by-the-book man who vanished from the registrar's office just after the plat revisions. No farewell, no pension trail. Maybe Daniel had written to him. Maybe K was part of all this. At dawn, I dressed, grabbed the map, and drove to the county archive. It was a squat brick building with dusty windows and a faded eagle seal above the door. But as I pulled into the lot, I knew something was wrong. Yellow tape fluttered in the breeze. A sheriff's cruiser idled nearby. A deputy stood by the entrance, arms crossed. I rolled down my window. "What happened?" I asked. "Break-in overnight," he said, grim. "Records room got hit, mostly land files, gonna be closed for days." I clutched the steering wheel. Land files. They'd gotten to it first. I didn't drive home. I circled the block twice, then parked behind an abandoned dry cleaner and walked back toward the county archive on foot. The breeze smelled like scorched leaves and copier toner. Across the street, someone waved. Curtis Hall. He stood near a parked sedan, hands in his pockets, eyes serious. "You okay?" he asked as I approached. "They broke in," I said. "Land files are gone." He exhaled through his nose, jaw tight. "I got a voicemail," he said. "Blocked number. Just one sentence. Stay away from Talbert business." We ducked into a nearby diner. Red vinyl booths, stale toast smell. I spread out my folder. Map, copies, Carla's sketch, Daniel's letter. Curtis listened, eyebrows furrowed, nodding as I talked. Then I played the corrupted file for him. He flinched at the static, then leaned closer. "That voice at the end," he said. "It's not Daniel." "What?" He played it again, isolating the last 3 seconds. "That's Kenneth Ulrich. I used to intern in his office. He had a deep drawl, always said Lorraine like it had 3 syllables. "You're sure?" 100%. And he used to record everything. Meetings, phone calls. He kept backups off-site. "Where?" Curtis snapped his fingers, trying to remember. "There was a unit. Storage place by the highway. He once sent me to drop off tapes." We looked it up. Safe Lock Storage, Junction 12. 40 minutes later, we were standing in a dusty lobby. The clerk was young, bored, chewing on a straw. "Kenneth Ulrich?" Curtis asked. "Any unit still active?" The clerk tapped a few keys, then narrowed his eyes. "That one was transferred to a niece last year. Says she stopped payments 2 months ago." "Is it empty?" "Don't think so. Hold on." He disappeared into the back. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When he returned, his face was pale. He held a black VHS tape in one hand, in red marker. Boundary meeting, Langford, Talbert, Ulrich. We found the last working photo lab in the county. It sat between a dry cleaner and a vape shop, the windows still papered with Kodak logos and We Do VHS to digital signs in sun-faded reds and yellows. Rudy, the technician, looked like he'd been born with a soldering iron in one hand and a magnifying glass in the other. When Curtis mentioned Kenneth Ulrich, Rudy's eyebrows lifted. "Kenny. Haven't heard that name in years. Always brought me tapes labeled boring stuff. Let me see it." He slid the tape into a battered VCR hooked to a flat screen and began the digitization process. The screen flickered to life. Grainy, muted tones. The time code blinked in the corner. 3 people sat at a folding table in a windowless room. Daniel, Darla, Kenneth. Daniel looked pale, his hands folded too tightly in his lap. Darla sat back in her chair, her lipstick too bright, her smile a blade. Kenneth adjusted his glasses, visibly agitated. "You can't revise the line just because it's inconvenient," Kenneth said. "It's not inconvenient," Darla snapped. "It's catastrophic. If this goes on record, my husband's name ends up in every paper from here to Maricopa." Daniel stayed silent. "I need a quiet fix." Darla continued. That's why we're all here. Then, on tape, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a check. Slid it across the table. Kenneth stared at it. You think I'm for sale? The camera jolted as he stood reaching for it. We're done here, he muttered. But just before the tape ended, just before the screen cut to black, Darla leaned forward, looked directly into the lens, and said, calm as ice, "You should consider a graceful exit." I gasped. It was the exact same phrase Clarissa Vaughn had whispered to me at the registrar's office. The second the tape ended, I said one word. Copies. Curtis nodded. We left Rudy's shop with the VHS digitized and burned to 3 DVDs. I uploaded the file to a cloud account, one I hadn't touched since Carla left for college. Changed the password. Printed 2 stills from the footage, one of Darla sliding the check, the other of her staring dead into the camera. At the print center, I caught a flicker in the corner of the window. A sedan idling across the street. Beige. Same scratch on the rear panel I'd seen 2 days ago. Curtis saw it too. They're watching you, he muttered. Or both of us. We took the long way home. When I stepped inside my house, the air felt wrong, still, heavy. A white envelope lay just inside the front door. No stamp, no address. I opened it slowly. Just one sentence. Typed, "Withdraw your claim by Friday. Last warning." Wednesday. That gave me 2 days. I called Malcolm. His voice was strained. "They've put me on administrative leave," he said. "Said I overstepped procedural lines." "But you didn't," I whispered. He hesitated. "Lorraine, check page 4 of the assessor's roll from 99. Daniel gave me a copy years ago. The buyer listed on the Langford transfer, it's not Darla." "Then who?" Static on the line. "Just look. I shouldn't even be on this call." Click. I ran to Daniel's archive. Page 4, Parcel 49B. Transferred March 1999. Buyer. Carla L. Talbert. My daughter. Carla's name. In black ink, clean and official. On the assessor's roll from 1999. Listed as the buyer for Parcel 49B. Darla's land. I sat in the kitchen, barely breathing. My teacup rattled against the saucer. Why would Carla, my daughter, buy land under someone else's name? Why would Daniel let her? I tore open her old sketchbook again, flipped past the maps, past the charcoal birds and bitter scribbles. Near the back, a loose scrap fell out. Lined paper. Her handwriting. Angled. Urgent. She said no one would believe me, said if I told, she'd make sure they took everything from Mom. I read it twice, then 3 more times. Blackmail. Or something worse. Curtis returned around dusk, coat dusted with wind and worry. "Marlene had notes," he said. "Stuff she wrote before she passed. She told me Darla used ghost buyers, fake transfers, backdated deeds, to bury disputes." "She used Carla," I whispered, "and Daniel must have known." Curtis stared at the floor. "They tried to protect you. Maybe Carla got in too deep." We worked fast after that. We prepped the video, trimmed it, added captions. Saved it on a USB stick labeled, "To board, urgent, no names." We were going to drop it at the county building Dropbox first thing. I was sealing the envelope when my tablet buzzed. Unknown caller. Video request. I nearly didn't answer, but my thumb moved on its own. The screen flickered, then settled. Carla, my daughter. Older, paler. Her hair pulled back in a rush. Her eyes, still mine. She opened her mouth and said, "Mom, they told me you'd find the map. Mom, they told me you'd find the map." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared. Carla looked like herself and not older, worn, but still with that steel spine I remember from the age of 16, standing in the kitchen and refusing to eat Darla Langford's cornbread at the HOA picnic. She gave a tight smile. "You kept the jacket." I kept everything, I whispered. I'm in Nevada, she said quickly. Safe house. Curtis's cousin helped. Curtis, she nodded. He's one of the good ones. I wasn't sure if I could trust him, but you, I hoped you'd find it. Carla, why your name? On the Langford parcel? She exhaled hard. Because Dad asked me to. He said it was temporary, that Darla's husband was about to get exposed, and they needed a buffer name on the reassignment so the plat wouldn't flag during audit. And you signed? I was 18. I believed him, but when I read the fine print, I realized it wasn't a buffer. It was a full transfer, and that it made me liable. She paused, eyes glassy. I told them I'd go public, that I'd take it to the paper. That's when Darla threatened you. My breath caught. She said you'd lose the house, that she'd sweep the whole Talbert mess off the map. Dad told me to leave, said it was the only way to keep you safe. I covered my mouth with one hand. She looked straight at me. I didn't disappear because I was angry. I disappeared because I was scared. I opened my mouth to ask who else was involved, who she meant by they, but the feed lagged. Carla's voice crackled. Mom, you need to watch the second tape, the one marked static. The screen froze, then black. The second the screen went black, I ran, back to Daniel's archive, to every drawer, cabinet, box. The one marked fertilizer had nothing but flashlights. The vehicle folder held only tire receipts. I was starting to think Carla had dreamed it until I opened the tax bin. There, behind folders of utility bills, was an old leather photo album, labeled Langford Renovation, 97. I flipped it open. Pages of Darla's half-finished koi pond, Daniel's hands measuring a trench, Kenneth half smiling in the background. Taped behind the last page was a VHS, written in Sharpie, "Backup, do not edit." Curtis drove. I didn't trust my hands to steer. Rudy didn't ask questions, just raised his eyebrows and loaded the tape. This one was different. Outdoor footage, nighttime, a handheld camcorder, Daniel, Kenneth, and a third man, face in shadows, voice digitally altered. They argued in clipped, anxious tones. "You were supposed to pull the file," the altered voice said. "I did," Kenneth snapped. "But you buried the Allridge file deeper than I thought. I found the override slip." Daniel shifted, uncomfortable. "The fake names won't hold if it's reviewed," Kenneth added. "The parcel titles won't match." Then the shadowed figure stepped closer. In his hand, a file folder. The camera tilted, catching the label in one blurred flash. Registrar Override Auth, 1999. Rudy hit pause. Rewound. Froze the frame. "There," he said. "I can clean this up. Might take a few—" The door burst open. 2 men, suits, no warmth. They flashed badges I didn't get a chance to read. "We need to confiscate that footage," the taller one said. "Now." Rudy didn't flinch. "This is private property," he said calmly. "And that tape belongs to my customer." The taller man stepped forward. "We have jurisdiction." "Then come back with a warrant," Rudy replied, slipping the tape into a drawer. Under the table, I pressed the USB copy into Curtis's palm. "Go," I mouthed. He nodded once and slipped quietly toward the back. The second man, shorter, phone in hand, kept glancing at me like he wanted to say more. Then it rang. He stepped away to answer. The taller one leaned in. "You don't know what you're stirring up." I smiled, tired and sharp. "I think I do." Curtis was gone now. Rudy, bless him, started accidentally labeling DVDs with the wrong markers. Birthday 2003, dog training. The taller agent sighed, frustrated. The phone call ended. The short man reappeared, tense. "Pull out," he said. "Orders changed." They left without another word, but as the tall one stepped past me, he muttered low enough for only me to hear, "If this goes public, we all lose more than land." Back at the house, Curtis was already uploading the footage. "I used Marlene's old contact," he said. "Local reporter. Used to cover zoning corruption back in the day. She'll know what to do." We prepped the files, drafted the email. As I hovered over the send button, my laptop dinged. "New message. No sender. No subject. Just one sentence. Too late. The board votes tomorrow at noon. Time shrank into hours. Curtis and I printed the stills, Darla, the check, the folder. We attached Marlene's original letter and a transcript of Kenneth's voice from the backup tape. I added a personal statement. No rage, just facts. This goes into the record, I said. They can't ignore it. Curtis nodded. Open comment periods 10 minutes before the vote. We show up early. We make them listen. Before we left, I walked to the garage. Daniel's old toolbox sat under a tarp, untouched for years. The padlock rusted, the hinges stiff. I pried it open. Inside, wrenches, oil rags, a paperclip chain Carla made in second grade. And Daniel's compass, scratched brass, cracked glass, still spun true. It was the one he used in '98, before the line was changed, before the lies. I slipped it into my coat pocket. We drove in silence. The HOA meeting hall looked like a church hosting a bake sale. Folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, a makeshift dais with 5 nameplates. Darla sat at the center, wrapped in pastel silk and false serenity. Clarissa Vaughn stood beside her, conferring quietly. Curtis and I took our seats. When the floor opened, I rose and approached the podium. Clarissa beat me there. Mrs. Talbert has been formally barred from presenting. Violation of Article 8, Section 2, defamation risk, pending investigation. I opened my mouth. Before I could speak, a voice rang out from the back of the room. Objection, filed this morning. I turned. A woman in a dark blazer stood, briefcase in hand. I didn't recognize her. But the logo on her badge? Registrar's office. The woman in the blazer stepped forward, badge glinting. Naomi Clark, she said. Registrar's office. Emergency audit clearance. Effective this morning. Clarissa Vaughn looked like she'd swallowed her own teeth. Naomi continued, cool and direct. This board cannot proceed with a land seizure vote while under evidence of title fraud. I'm invoking Article 12 of the County Assessor's Charter. This file, she raised a red folder, contains verification of falsified plat alterations from 1999 and testimony from Registrar Malcolm Reese. Darla stood. This is a farce. Naomi turned a page. You recognize this email? Dated May 3rd, 1999? Your husband authorized the override under the name Carla Talbert, without parental consent, without title transfer protocol. Gasps, murmurs. Curtis leaned forward beside me. You did it, he whispered. I stepped up beside Naomi. My hands shook as I placed Daniel's compass on the podium. This pointed true before your lies ever did, I said, voice low but steady. The room held its breath. The board members huddled. Finally, the chairman, a man named Gerald Quinn, cleared his throat. We'll delay the vote, 24 hours. Final review at noon tomorrow. A small victory, but temporary. That night, I returned home exhausted. The wind had picked up. My gate creaked on its hinges. Then I saw it. The padlock was broken. Boot prints, deep, fresh, led around the side of the house, to Carla's old window. I followed them. Slowly. Inside the sill, tucked just behind the glass, a folded note. Plain paper. 5 words. You don't know the whole truth. The note rattled me. Not the words, those were cryptic enough, but the handwriting. Not Carla's, not Daniel's, not anyone I recognized. I stared at it under the kitchen lamp for almost an hour. Then I went back to the box. Carla's old things, sketches, report cards, a worn ribbon from her spelling bee win. And at the very bottom, a diary I'd never seen before. Small, locked. But the clasp had rusted open. I flipped through pages of teen angst and ink hearts. But near the back, a torn page, April 2000. I met with Mr. Ulrich, told him I knew. He looked sick, said the name switch wasn't just mine, it was happening all over. He told me there's a shell ledger, not at the registrar, a backup under a fake name. I asked what it was called. He said Harrow, that it was safer if I forgot it. I sat back, the blood rushing in my ears. Harrow. Curtis came over later. I showed him the entry. We ran a search on the county archive cross-index, looked for parcels tied to names that didn't belong. And at 2:03 a.m., we found them. 3 properties, different zones, but each with deeds filed under the same alias, J.L. Harrow. Curtis stared at the screen. That name sound familiar? It did, but not from the registry, from a photo. Daniel once kept a picture tucked in a sock drawer, a man standing beside him, arm slung over Daniel's shoulder. On the back, Daniel had scribbled, "Me and J.L., 1981. Before I could reach the attic trunk to check, my phone buzzed. No number, no caller, just one sentence. "You're looking for the wrong Talbert." The sock drawer hadn't changed in years. Same faded flannel shirts, same 2 spare keys, same photograph folded 4 times and tucked behind the socks. Daniel and another man, standing in front of a beige building with a sagging awning. The sign overhead, Southwest Survey Company. Their arms around each other like brothers. On the back, Daniel's handwriting. "Me and J.L., 1981. Harrow." The name echoed now like a dropped wrench in a quiet room. I sat on the bed, heart thudding. Curtis arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and a zoning map from '81 he'd dug up in the registrar's microfilm. "Look," he said, pointing at the edge, tiny initials, JLH, and a note in pencil. "Future corridor, Langford?" I stared at it. "He was there before us," I murmured, "before Daniel broke ground, before the neighborhood existed." Then I reread the message from earlier. "You're looking for the wrong Talbert." "Wrong how? Wrong name? Wrong motive?" Curtis frowned. "You think it's Carla?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know who I trust." I went back to the garage, hands trembling. Daniel's workbench creaked when I leaned on it. Beneath, behind a curtain of old drop cloths, was a chest, locked. I used Daniel's spare key. Inside, letters, dozens, all addressed to J.L., all in Daniel's familiar script. The top envelope felt thicker, heavier. I opened it. First line. "You were right about Carla. She's not who we thought." I unfolded the letter on the kitchen table, hands stiff from cold and fear. I've gone over it again. I keep thinking I missed something. Missed her. Carla says she left to protect Lorraine, but there are details she never explained. Like how Darla had the second map before the transfer ever filed. She had it weeks earlier. Carla must have drawn it. She had to. No one else could replicate the lines so precisely. I stared at the ink. He didn't believe Carla left willingly. He believed she helped Darla create a false division and then disappeared out of guilt. Or maybe worse. Curtis read over my shoulder. "There's something here," he said, tapping a corner note. "Confirm stored behind third beam, west wall." We went to the garage, counted beams, third from the left. Curtis pried gently at the paneling. Behind it, wrapped in plastic and duct tape, was a narrow metal tube. Inside, another map. Hand-drawn, crisper lines, labeled in Carla's handwriting. And one major difference. A boundary line that ran diagonally, not horizontally, through the Langford parcel, which meant the entire subdivision had been measured wrong from the start. "This changes everything," Curtis whispered. I couldn't speak. The map shook in my hands. In the corner, in faded graphite, a signature. Carla Talbert, 1998. We stood in silence. That night I stayed at the table tracing the new lines, trying to understand. The lights flickered, then cut. Darkness swallowed the room, and from somewhere near the back door, a voice. "You should have left it buried." I didn't scream. I just reached for Daniel's old flashlight, the heavy one he kept charged even after we stopped using it. "Curtis!" I whispered sharply. He thundered down the stairs, crowbar in hand. We moved toward the back door in silence. It was open. Not wide, just enough. Wind rustled the curtain. Outside, boot prints, new ones, led across the patio and through the side yard, toward the woods past the fence. Whoever it was, they knew where to step, Curtis murmured. Avoided the gravel. I called Deputy Marcel. She arrived 12 minutes later, eyes alert, holster unbuckled. Talbert Parcel's getting attention, she said quietly. Not just from the board. There's chatter about a private group, investors, using eminent domain clauses. Why? I asked. Because that land connects 3 utility corridors. And if your claim's legit, the Langford Wedge collapses. I handed her the second map. She studied it like it was a holy relic. I'll file a legal hold, she said. Stops any title transfers or construction permits. Gives you breathing room. Before she left, she glanced around my dark yard. Whatever you do, don't stay here alone. 20 minutes later, I heard the low rumble of tires on asphalt, a black SUV parked across the street. And then, Clarissa Vaughn. Perfect hair, perfect coat, dead eyes. She stepped out and walked straight toward my porch. Clarissa didn't knock. She stepped inside like it was still her house. Curtis moved to block her, but I held up a hand. I won't stay long, she said, setting her clutch on my table like we were at tea. I just wanted to clear the air before tomorrow. There's nothing to clear, I said. Unless you mean the forged plats, the buried registry, or the threats. She smiled, razor thin. You're framing a man who can't defend himself. I set the second map down between us. Her smile twitched. And these? I added, pulling out Daniel's letters. He defended himself just fine. Clarissa studied me, eyes cold. Some truths, Lorraine, she said softly, undo more than they fix, especially in a town where people still owe favors. She stood to leave, then paused. From her bag, she pulled a velvet pouch, set it gently on the table. This belonged to Daniel. You never asked where it went. She left without another word. Inside the pouch, Daniel's old fountain pen, the one he only used for deeds and signatures. Curtis, frowning, ran his fingers along the pouch's lining. Something crackled. He opened a hidden seam. Inside, a folded slip. Land claim form, dated 1999. 3 names listed. Daniel Talbert, Carla Talbert, J.L. Harrow. I stared at it, the world tilting. This was the missing link. We scanned the slip quickly, uploading copies. That's when the knock came. Not sharp, not hurried, but firm. I opened the door. Naomi Clark stood there, and behind her 2 uniformed agents. Naomi's knock was polite, the 2 agents with her, less so. We're requesting all original documents, Naomi said. The second map, the claim slip, anything that hasn't been submitted officially yet. For what purpose? I asked. Emergency validation under Section 17B, she replied. It ensures nothing gets challenged after the vote. I hesitated. You already have scans. They won't hold if the originals aren't submitted. Curtis looked at me, then at Naomi. I nodded slowly and handed over the pouch, the map, and the slip. Naomi handled them with care, sliding each into labeled sleeves. The taller agent kept glancing at the velvet pouch. Curtis took a step back and, quiet as a breeze, snapped a photo of the man's badge. They left with formal nods. The house fell silent. Curtis locked the door. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Deputy Marcel. They just locked me out, she said, voice tight. I can't access parcel records, not even my own district. What? I whispered. My login's been flagged as inactive protocol. That doesn't happen unless someone upstairs triggers it. I leaned on the counter, heart sinking. Lorraine, she said, don't trust everyone from the registrar. Some of them, they've been in Darla's pocket for years. After she hung up, I stared at the empty table. The pen was gone, the map, the slip, all of it. Then an alert. New email. Sender. Carla, secure. No subject, no text, just one attachment. A photo. 3 people standing on a scrubby hilltop. Daniel Talbert, J.L. Harrow, and Darla Langford. The hillside in the photo was unmistakable. Old Mill Road, the one place Daniel used to drive alone for air. Curtis and I set out before sunrise. The air was cold, the ground damp with old ash and pine needles. Behind a line of scrub oak, we found it, a shallow depression near a crumbling fence post. Curtis dug gently, metal scraped, a box. Inside, damp survey notes, a curled ledger page, and a letter, half burned at the edges. Daniel's handwriting. JL, I did what she asked. I redrew the line. I used Carla's name. But it wasn't just about land. It was about shielding her from what comes out if the registry pulls parent records. They'll find out she's not mine, not by blood, and they'll unravel everything we built. I lied to protect her. And now it's coming apart. I sank to my knees. Not his daughter, but he loved her like one. That I knew. Still, he had falsified landlines, smeared ink on a generation of trust to hide something deeper. Curtis touched my shoulder. There's more. At the bottom of the box, an unlabeled cassette. No case, just tape. Rudy was still in his shop. When he saw us, he wordlessly powered up the deck. As he loaded the cassette, I turned it over. Faded ink on the side. Confession. Rudy hit play. Just then, my phone buzzed. Carla, I answered, her voice, calm, soft, final. Mom, I need to tell you who I really am. JL, Harrow was my biological father, Carla said. Daniel knew. He found out when I was 13. Darla threatened to expose it unless he redrew the parcels. I held the phone tighter. He never told me, I whispered. Because he loved you, and he didn't want you to think he loved me less. Tears blurred my vision. I never did, I said. Not once. Carla's voice cracked. I drew the second map to fix it. Darla found it before I could register it. That's when I left. In Rudy's shop, the tape whirred to life. Daniel's voice, slower, heavier. If you're hearing this, then it all came undone. I altered plats. At first, small things. Then names. Carla's, Harrow's, mine. I told myself it was protection. If Darla turns, the fallback's in the crawl space. Copper register, east wall. Curtis and I didn't wait. Back at the house, we hauled open the cellar hatch. The crawl space smelled of rust and pine. Curtis held the flashlight. I crawled on hands and knees. Copper register, east wall. I knocked. Hollow. We pried it loose. Inside, a ledger. Heavy, wrapped in plastic. Labeled, Talbert Contingency. We brought it upstairs. Open to the first page. 3 names. Talbert, Langford, Reese. At the top, distribution ledger. The ledger felt colder than paper had any right to. Curtis and I turned page after page, rows of parcel IDs, owner aliases, transfer chains that looped back to the same 3 names. Talbert, Langford, Reese. Dozens of entries, offshore accounts, dummy LLCs, quiet swaps. One column chilled me. Allocation notes. School land diverted to private hands. Shell buyer, Harrow Trust. Title held dormant, redeemed 2025. Then I saw it. Parcel 38A, my house. Listed under a holding trust filed by Harrow's firm in 1982. I didn't own it, not officially. Daniel never filed the transfer to me, just held it in trust, quietly, legally reversible. I sat down hard on the kitchen stool. Curtis ran a hand through his hair. We have to go public. I stared at the page. And torch every family on this list? You didn't build the fire. I called Carla. You can't protect ghosts, she said. Tell the truth. We copied every page, packed them into a folder. We'd deliver them in person to Naomi at the vote. As I closed the box, Curtis froze. Lorraine, he said, look under the lid. Taped to the underside, a key. Small, brass, numbered. The tag, Wellspring Bank, Box 421. We reached the community hall just after sunrise. Naomi waited by the rear door, eyes sharp, coat zipped to her chin. Curtis handed her the ledger. She flipped it open, scanned the names, and nodded once. "I'll file an injunction," she said. "We'll need your affidavit." Inside, the board shuffled papers. Darla smiled too wide. "As chair," she began, "I move that we—" Naomi stood. "Motion denied." She placed a single sheet on the dais. "This meeting is suspended pending investigation under County Fraud Statute 42. Gasps. Murmurs. Darla stepped back, face flushed. Clarissa glanced at the door and walked out. I approached the microphone. "No speeches," I said. "Just a line." I unfolded Daniel's confession. I redrew the line to hide my mistake, and that mistake was silence. Then I sat down. Darla resigned the next day. Naomi kept her promise. Weeks passed. The house was quiet again. One morning, I took the brass key to Wellspring Bank, Box 421. Inside, a velvet ring box, Daniel's wedding band, Carla's birth certificate, and a note. "For when she's ready to come home." I mailed them to her. No message. That evening, I walked the land, compass in hand. I followed the old bearing east, then north. At the edge of the woods, I found it, a rusty survey stake. Half buried. I cleared the earth around it, drove a fresh flag into the soil, not to claim it, to honor what was lost and found.